Okay, so tell me if this sounds familiar. You interview with a company and it goes amazing. And at the end, they say, hey, we'll reach out in the next few days to coordinate next steps. And you're like, okay, good. I'm moving on towards getting an offer. This is gonna happen. But in a few days, they reach out and go, hey, we have to sort through a few things. We'll be in touch within the next week or so to tell you what's next. And it went from thinking, okay, I've got momentum here, to wondering what in the world is actually gonna happen next. The process has been delayed. This actually happens a ton in the recruitment process. I've been in recruitment for 15 years, and in today's video, I'm gonna give you the 4 reasons which are most likely why that's happening. And I'll tell you which ones are good for you, meaning you still might get the job, and which ones are bad, meaning there is a very low likelihood that you're actually gonna get the job. Let's go. Now, first and foremost, this is probably the most common asked question I get on my YouTube channel, people reaching out and saying, hey Ben, this happened, what do you think it means? And the reality is, it could mean a lot of things. So I'll give you the 4 most common things that are happening when an interview process gets delayed, and make sure you stay to the end, because the last one happens a lot and it could really impact your likelihood of getting the job offer. Now, the first reason why there is a delay in the interview process is scheduling. Scheduling is actually a huge issue when it comes to interviewing. You have an interview with a recruiter or an HR person, it goes great. But that next step, maybe it involves 4 or 5 people. Well, finding 1 to 2 hours on 4 to 5 busy people's schedule can actually be a nightmare. I know, because I've coordinated interviews in the past, and now when people coordinate interviews for people who would be interviewed for my team, well, it might take a while depending on who else needs to be involved. This frequently happens with a candidate. So they interview, it goes great, the recruiter goes, hey, I've got someone, and they go, okay, cool. If you could find something on my calendar, my assistant's calendar, my peer's calendar, and then my senior lead on my team's calendar for 2 hours in the next week, that'd be great. Oh, and by the way, I'm traveling the week after, and at the end of the week, my other person, and you get what I'm saying. It can be really hard to coordinate that. If that happens, the likelihood of you getting an offer is still good. If they seemed very interested in you and very high on your potential to join the team, that hasn't changed here, but it might delay the process, which is annoying. Now, the other thing that happens pretty frequently is there's some sort of business disruption, right? That could be an unexpected client visit, and it's happening in a few days. That's when your interview was scheduled. Now they've got to move it. Or, all of a sudden a person has to travel for business, right? The hiring manager goes up, you know what, I've got to go overseas and meet with one of our suppliers. Because of that, I'm not going to be able to interview for the next week and a half. Well, if you're the recruiter, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have no idea. And the thing is, recruiters don't always do a very good job of communicating what is going on. That also frequently happens. And it is one of the most common reasons why processes get delayed. If this happens, it's also not a big deal. If they liked you, you're still likely to move forward. This is more of a timeline thing. It's not really disrupting the probability of you moving forward. Hey, if you're liking this information so far, do me a quick favor, hit that like button. It's free, and it basically just tells YouTube that I don't suck. So if you don't hit it, you are telling YouTube I suck. Just so we're clear. The next thing that happens a lot is they decide to change the role. They interview a few candidates and they go, you know what? It would be great if they also had this. And then the recruiter in HR goes, okay, well, people don't often have this experience and that experience. And the hiring manager goes, well, maybe I'll need to change the role then. And then there is a massive pause in the interview process. This happens often when there's like 2 or 3 candidates in process. And now all of a sudden they've determined, well, I might want to look for something else. And when this happens, it is definitely going to delay the process. Maybe longer than the first 2 reasons I gave you, but it also is more disruptive to your candidacy in the sense that you might not meet all the new qualifications. Some of the new things they're looking for in a candidate, you might not have in their background. And if that's the case, they have to determine, well, are those must-haves or are those nice-to-haves? Because if they're nice-to-haves, they might still want to move forward with you. But if they've determined that things that they now want in the position that they didn't want before are must-haves, well, this might lead to you not being qualified anymore. This next one happens a lot, and if it happens, it's pretty much a deal breaker on your behalf. And that is a candidate gets introduced late into the process who is a front runner for the role. So you're interviewing for a position, you've met with a few people, it's going great, they feel like, oh man, this person's really good. But then all of a sudden someone comes in, and this candidate is often a referral from somebody important in the organization, or somebody who knows the role intimately and goes, hey, I know a person, they are great for this. Or it's an internal applicant who hadn't expressed interest previously, but now is saying, I want that role. in both of those situations, unless you are the perfect candidate, you are at a significant disadvantage. So often what happens is they're like, yeah, next steps, next steps. This person comes into play. All of a sudden the recruiter goes back to you and goes, hey, hold on a minute. We're figuring some things out. We'll be in touch in the next week or two. What's really happening in the background is they've accelerated the process for another more hireable candidate because of how they were introduced to the process. If this happens, it definitely decreases the likelihood of you getting a job offer. This is one of those things that is maybe worst case scenario, but it's not as bad as the next one. Now this next one, this happens a lot, and it's a hiring freeze, right? So, and sometimes not even a total hiring freeze, but things aren't going as well in the company as they anticipated when they set out headcount. And all of a sudden they go, okay, we need to look at all the recs we have open and determine which one of these are essential and which one of these roles we can wait on. And this actually happens a lot. And this can happen to a handful of recs. If a company's hiring for 30 roles, they might say, hey, we need to pause on all 30. And we need to determine which 15 of these are critical and which 15 can wait to the next quarter. And if your 15 are one of the ones we could wait on, then it's like immediately like at least a 3-month pause. And this actually happens all the time, especially at large companies, where there are shareholder meetings and there are quarterly reports and earning reports. When that happens, if you are in line for one of those positions that is deemed to be non-critical, it might be a very long time before they open that position up again. And even worse, they might repost it and consider an entire new grouping of applicants along with what they already have if their mind wasn't made up on a person to begin with. So if that happens, it's going to make it a lot more challenging for you. One of the ways to avoid this is being the best possible candidate for the job. And I know that's put pretty simply, but if you're an amazing candidate, you can often bypass some of these things and they'll want to accelerate you to the offer stage just because of how good candidate you are. So I made this video here. It's the single quickest way to improve as a candidate. If you have 7 minutes and you want to learn how to improve as much as possible, as quickly as possible, you'll go watch this video. I'll see you over there.